Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So today I want to talk about a problem that I'm sure everyone has encountered at least once or twice in their life. Namely, that is grinding for experience in retro RPGs. Specifically, I want to talk about Final Fantasy IV. So my daughters are finally old enough to start playing role-playing games and Super Nintendo games, and we're actually working through probably what is one of the best, if not, it's probably my absolute favorite video game of all time, namely Final Fantasy IV. So right now, they are here in the Sylvan Cave, and actually, this is a perfect example of what I want to talk about today. There are tons of these enemies in this cave, namely these bog witches coupled with tiny toads, and they're super annoying, but they actually don't do anything. They don't attack your party at all. All they do is turn you into toads. Now watch this. I can basically defeat these enemies by just constantly hammering on the A button, right? If you just sit here and just keep pushing A, what you're going to end up doing is, yeah, sure, a lot of your party is going to get turned into toads, but look at this. I'm not even watching the screen. I am just hitting A to basically have the current character attack whatever enemy happens to be next in line. And as you can see, this strategy works surprisingly well of just hammering on the A button. It's a little boring and tedious, but it works. So what I want to talk about now is, can we automate this and in fact use this because this cave, the Sylvan Cave, is infested with these bog witches and tiny toads. In fact, when we first started playing through this, that's all there was. There were only bog witches and these toads. So basically, this is a fertile ground for grinding for experience because there are all these enemies that don't hurt you at all and are super duper easy to defeat in the sense that it's completely brainless and all you have to do is hit A. So this led to the discussion of, well, is there some way that instead of us just having to push the A button all the time, could we automate this and simultaneously learn about science and engineering? So with that, let's show and take a look at this contraption that the girls put together. Alright, so we saw those enemies are ridiculously easy to defeat, and after talking with the girls, we decided that, you know what, a sequence of inputs of just A, basically just repeat pushing the A button a bunch of times will defeat the enemy, and then what we need to do is we need to actually hit the joystick left and then right just to have the character move left and right in the map screen so that you might trigger another encounter with these same enemies, and then you just have to hit A a bunch more and that will defeat the set of enemies. So really a repeating sequence of just A for some number of times, then left, right, and then A, left, right. That should basically work to grind experience points out of these bog witches and tiny toads in this Sylvan Cave dungeon of Final Fantasy IV. So we decided to take this as an excellent opportunity to learn some Arduino. So I'm really proud of what the girls put together here. They basically set up some code. If you look at this, all they're doing is getting a couple of servos to basically push the A button 5 times, and then they also wrote a function to wiggle the joystick left and right. So really, it's pretty darn simple Arduino code, but it should work. So now, why don't we go ahead and upload this? So let's zoom out a little so you can see, and I'm just going to hit upload, and that should be now uploading to, if you come over here, you'll be able to see they've got it hooked up to this little Arduino Nano, okay? And the Arduino Nano is hooked up to a bunch of servos. It's kind of hard to see, but we've clamped everything together on top of the GameCube controller. That actually turned out to be the hardest part, is securing these controllers to the GameCube controller. Let me turn on the power supply. And now you can see, here goes. 5 hits of the A button. And then they've got this little Lego piece set up to wiggle the controller left and right, and then go back to hitting the A. So this is pretty much the setup, and hopefully this should automate the entire enemy fighting sequence in the game. So tell you what, let's go back to the game and see if this works. Actually, maybe what I will do is I'll show you one other thing that makes this helpful is we actually have 2 controllers. So right now the automated controller is not plugged in. the servos are hitting it, everything, but it's just not plugged in. We've got another controller here, which we will use for manual control just to get the system set up. We basically need to find a hallway in the dungeon where it's safe to move left and right continuously. So we'll do that, and we'll basically get everything set up manually, and then once we're in place, we'll plug in the automated experience point getting system and let it rip. So let's give this a try. All right, so we found a perfect spot in the dungeon to start our experience farming. You can see right here, we've got this narrow corridor where it's very easy and safe to go left and right. There's no lava puddles that we're gonna step in, and we should start being able to use this to encounter these bog witches and basically beat them up without any fear of any retribution. One thing we should do before we get started is, let's change some of the equipment, specifically on people like anyone that's using a bow and arrow. So I think they've got roses set up to use. Yeah, you can see an elven bow and poison arrow. So let's take off the bow and arrows and give her something else that is not going to only have a limited amount of shots. Something like, okay, I guess the girls didn't manage their inventory too efficiently. There's nothing else besides bow and arrow, so I guess we're gonna have to leave Rosa punching people. So, with that though, I think we're all set up. Everyone has equipment now that is not going to be using anything up during this farming process. So now what we should do is, let's unplug our manual controller. Oh, actually, let me get out of the menu screen. Okay, here we are. Let's unplug the manual controller. We will then plug in our automatic farming Arduino-based servo system. And now when I turn on the power supply, it should get going. Uh-oh, wait a second, something happened. I accidentally hit a button. Whoops, Cecil moved down a little bit. So let me move up one slot. Okay, there we go, something like that. And now we'll plug in our automatic farming system and now turn on the power supply. All right, and we're off to the races. So now you can see he's going to start moving left and right, and hopefully we should encounter some of these enemies, and then we're going to start hammering on the A button to beat them up and get their experience points. So let's let this run for a little bit, and we'll see if we encounter some of these bog witches. There we go. Yes. All right, so we're off to the races with our automated farming system. And as you can see, what ends up happening is, sure, a lot of your party is going to end up turning into toads, but eventually we should win. So let's let this run for a while and see if we defeat these bog witches and tiny toads. How do you like that? It totally worked. So now we're back in the map screen, and let's see, we should just be able to encounter more witches like this and continue this ad nauseum. So in fact, maybe we should just let this run overnight and see how many levels we can get. All right, so as you can see, this seems to be working pretty reasonably. That being said, I do want to point out one thing that we sort of discovered that's a little bit unfortunate is the first time we went through this dungeon in this cave, pretty much the only enemies we ever encountered were these bog witches and tiny toads. And as you can see, if you encounter those, this strategy works phenomenally, right? All you need is the A button to win. Now, the problem is, if you go through this dungeon and get all the way to the bottom, and I guess, spoiler alert, if you don't know what's at the end of this dungeon, turn off the video and come back later when you do. But at the end of the dungeon, right, Yang is actually hanging out there being taken care of by a bunch of fairies, effectively, right? It seems that if you go through that and exit the dungeon and come back, now the enemies are slightly different inside the dungeon. Namely, it's not just the bog witches and their tiny toads, which are totally great, but there are slightly more difficult enemies where this automation does not work. So in that case, this strategy will fail. In other words, you kind of have to supervise this a little bit, at least for us, because we should have done this farming before we went all the way through the dungeon. And again, I'm not 100% certain that's how the game is programmed, but it appears that, yeah, like I said, once you go through the dungeon, the enemies become a little bit more difficult, and this might not work for you. So, what else should we talk about? This does seem to work with edge cases. We observed a couple of times where even in situations where the enemies drop items that you need to recover at the end of the fight, this A button strategy still works, and it proceeds as you would expect, and it just continues to work. So this is great. Like I said, I know this seems like a kind of a random video, and it's maybe not a problem that everyone encounters regularly, but I thought it was fun because it allowed us and the kids to kind of get some experience with automation and Arduinos and servos and some engineering. So I think it was a fun project. So with that being said, I think this is probably a great spot to leave it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if so, I also hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. Surprisingly, if you just scroll a little ways down and click on that subscribe button, it really does help me continue to make these videos. Hopefully we'll have more videos on automation and kid science projects in the future. And see, for example, here's one of the situations where now we're in trouble. So I better sign off on the video and switch the controllers and manually get out of this problem right now. So until then, I'll talk to you later, okay? Bye.